Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual non-deal roadshow. My name is Karina Tatrinova, virtual event moderator here at Renmark. And on behalf of our team, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us, especially those of you in Toronto and surrounding areas for the presentation of Sanu Gold Corporation, trading on the CSE under ticker symbol SANU. Presenting today is Vice President of Corporate Development and Communications, Fiona Child, as well as Martin Polachek, President and CEO. And now with that, Fiona, I present the floor to you.
Before I begin, I would like to point out that mining involves risk and we'll be making forward-looking statements today. Sanu Gold has assembled a portfolio of high-quality gold exploration projects in Guinea, West Africa. We hold approximately 280 square kilometers of land in a proven gold mining district. The company's been systematically exploring the three projects and has outlined extensive gold and bedrock anomalies. The work began with termite mound sampling in areas of artisanal mining, was followed up by grid-based auger drilling on widely spaced lines, going to do infill work on more tightly spaced lines, and defining drill targets which are outlined by multi-kilometer long gold anomalies. We began reverse circulation or RC drilling on the first of the three properties in August of this year. That was the Dana property. And with our first drill results, which we put out on Monday of this week, we announced a new discovery, the Dana 2 main zone. Results from the zone include up to 4.75 grams per ton gold over 21 meters, and Martin will be talking more about the results from that property later in the presentation. Looking first at the corporate side and the capital structure of the company, Sanu Gold listed on the CSE in mid-July. The share price had been around the low 30 range, and recently, since the announcement of the new discovery, we've been trading in the low 40s. We've got a tight share structure, just under 64 million shares fully diluted, and those shares are tightly held. Approximately half are held by management insiders, about a quarter by institutional investors, and the last quarter by high net worth individuals. Sanu has assembled a strong, experienced board of directors. At the helm is Vince Sirache, the executive chairman. He's a financier based in Vancouver and has been involved in the mining industry for 30 years. Our president, CEO, director, and co-founder of the company is Martin Polachek, who will be speaking later in the presentation. He's a geologist and has been working in Africa for over 20 years. Fatou Gouai is a Senegalese Australian finance professional who's been very involved in mining projects within West Africa. And rounding out the board is Galen McNamara. He's a geologist and CEO of Suma Silver. In terms of the management team, I've already introduced Martin and Vince. Myself, I'm an exploration geologist by background. I've been working for approximately 25 years on the technical and corporate side of the mining and exploration industry, primarily within the Americas and in Africa. Dr. Seringue Deng is our exploration manager. He has a PhD in structural geology from Queen's University in Canada, and he has extensive experience working in mesothermal gold systems both within Canada and throughout Western Africa. Cheikh Traoré is our general manager. He is Guinean, and he's actually from the part of Guinea where our projects are located, which is very useful to us in terms of our relations with the local communities. Cheikh acts as a country manager, liaising with government and with local officials and dealing with our logistical aspects of our programs. And rounding out the management team is Gavin Cooper, a finance professional based in Vancouver who's been involved in mining projects for over 30 years. We've got a great advisory board who have a depth of experience both technically and specifically in mining and exploration in Guinea. Dusko Jubojevic is a geologist, co-founder of the company, and is CEO of ASX-listed Raiden Resources. Brett Richards is the former CEO of Avocat Mining in Guinea, and Peter Flindell is a geologist with a depth of experience in Guinea and currently the VP Exploration for Gold Shore Resources. Before we talk about our projects, we'd like to provide an overview of Guinea because it's not a country that's often well known by North American investors. It's got a long mining history and it's rich in natural resources. Approximately a quarter of the country's GDP and 3/4 of the exports of the country are attributable to mining. A new mining code was established in Guinea in 2013. It was aimed at increasing transparency, reducing corruption, and strengthening environmental protections in the country. Guinea has been a member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative since 2007. And in general, operating in Guinea as an exploration company is very straightforward. There's really no red tape impediments to the quick execution of drill programs once a company has its drill permits in hand. And looking at a mining snapshot of the country, it's a top 3 global bauxite producer. That's the mineral from which aluminum is extracted. It's a top 15 global diamond producer, and in the top 20 in terms of global gold production. The Fraser Institute ranks Guinea very highly on its Investment Attractiveness Index. It's number 3 for jurisdictions in Africa and number 45 globally. Focusing then specifically on the gold mining industry for Guinea and the rationale for Sanu exploring in this country. Guinea is host to a world-class gold mining district with several multi-million-ounce gold mines and deposits. Gold mineralization is hosted within the Siguiri Basin in the northeast part of the country near the border with Mali. That's the area shown on this map in yellow. Operating mines in Guinea include AngloGold Ashanti's Siguiri Gold Mine and Nordgold's Leifa Gold Mine. In addition, ASX-listed Predictive Discovery made a major discovery at the Bankin project just over 2 years ago. And on the next slide, I'll provide an overview of that as an example of the potential in Guinea. Early in 2020, Predictive announced the results of a discovery hole on what would become the Bankin deposit. Within 18 months, they put out an initial resource of 3.6 million ounces of gold, and in August of this year, a revised resource moving up to 4.2 million ounces of gold with potential for growth, as indicated by the drill results they put out in the end of August, shown here in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. On the left side of the slide, we see Predictive's share price appreciation, going from a market cap of about $3.6 million pre-discovery to north of $300 million these days. So Predictive really is a great example of the potential for discovery of multi-million ounce gold deposits within Guinea's Siguiri Basin and the potential for appreciation of those companies making the discoveries. And with that introduction, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Martin, who will be talking specifically about Sanu's 3 gold projects.
So the company managed to secure 3 very high quality exploration permits. All 3 of them are located within the Siguiri Basin. You can see the Dinah property up here in Digifara and Bantambai. I'm just pointing out also the major mines in the region. So we're not too far from AngloGold's Siguiri mine, a major operation that's been producing gold for, I think, close to 20 years now. And then Leifa, operated by Nordgold, also a long time, large-scale gold producer. And then the Bankin discovery is just down here. And there's a new project under development, Tri-K, which is an old opposite assets that is now being developed by Managem. And there's a couple of older assets here, Kinero and Hummingbird's Carusa mine, which are going, I think, further drilling and potentially development. We're well located infrastructure-wise. The main road, which is good quality bitumen, runs from the border, basically across the southern corner of our Dinah permit, very close to Digifara, into the town of Siguiri, and then down to Kankan and the capital, Conakry further down. Bantambai is easily accessed with secondary roads. We could go to the next slide there. These are the earn-in terms. The properties were brought to us by our country manager, who's actually also the vendor of the assets. He's a long-running mining entrepreneur. He's invested into hard rock exploration for the last couple of years. and then realized they need to do a tractor partner. So we negotiated in 2020 an earn-in deal. We've just a few weeks ago announced that we've achieved a 51% interest in each of the permits. Basically, there was a commitment to spend a minimum of $400,000 per permit, and in a minimum amount of auger drilling and geochemistry. We have met all the targets and consequently earned our 51% interest. There were some payments along the way, according to milestones as well. And the next stage will be to earn 75% by spending an additional $600,000 over the next 18 months. And then we can get in stage 3 up to 80% interest, and in stage 4 we can get to 85% on completion of a feasibility study. The vendor then either contributes the capex or dilutes down to a 1.5 NSR. Also, once we have a feasibility in place, we can apply for a mining license, an exploitation permit, as it's called in Guinea. And at that stage, the Guinean government is typically entitled to a 15% stake, which will be diluting proportionally between ourselves and the vendor. This is the detail on the Dyna property. So each of our permits has very extensive surface gold anomalies as defined from our very extensive termite mount sampling. And typically we follow this termite gold anomaly up with systematic auger drilling. We run systematic lines initially at 400 meters spaced through the overburden, which is typically laterite between 2 and 15 meters thick. And then the auger will sample the top of the weathered bedrock, and this really just increases the resolution of where the gold is coming from. So it basically defines the auriferous, the gold-bearing structures in the bedrock. And with that, we can confidently come back and target with RC and diamond drilling. And we have done, I think, over 14,000 meters now of auger drilling on anomalies 1, 2, and 6. There are surface anomalies at 3, 4, and 5 also, but these are not auger drilled yet. We've focused on the biggest ones. This trend 1 here is basically 10 kilometers in strike length. Trend 2 is 4.5 kilometers in strike length, and trend 6 is 1.5 kilometers in strike length. So the first round of auger drilling, spaced at 400 meters between the lines and 25 meters along the lines, gave us a lot of very coherent bedrock gold anomalies that are shown here in red. So they line up on multiple holes along the lines, and between each line you can connect the anomalous zones. So that's what the red areas are delineating. So these are quite extensive. They're in the bedrock. We've had grades up to 5 grams over 10 meters on the first round, the very wide-spaced first round of auger drilling. Selected areas, we came back and did an infill round of auger drilling. That's given us up to 8.7 grams over 9 meters, and further increased the targets that we then test with RC drilling. The current campaign of RC testing that we just announced the first batch of results from was mainly focused on 2. We've drilled quite a few holes along trend 2 here, and then some scout drilling along trend 6 and along trend 1. So the results of that were quite encouraging for the first round drilling program. At Dyna 2, there's actually a set of artisanal workings where the local small-scale miners opened up a small pit, exposed some very nice looking alteration and extensive stockwork veining that assayed quite well with rock chip sampling from us as well. When we drilled under that, we've got results of up to 37 meters at just under 2 grams. There are some very high-grade narrow zones in there that increase the overall average, but the entire package is mineralized at reasonable grades over this width. And similarly on some of the other sections, we're getting 4.7 grams over 21 meters. Again, consistently there are narrow intervals of very high grades in there. And also up here, 5.5 over 11, and then 1.8 over 7. It looks to be a good package of mineralized material, which is consistently containing higher grade material as well. If we look at one of the sections there, it took us a while to figure out exactly which way the system was dipping. The initial interpretation from what we saw in some of these mining pits was for an east dipping system. Hence the early holes here actually had an azimuth to the west, and that's where some of these results are coming from that we reported. And when we started putting the puzzle together, we actually figured out that the structure is dipping moderately to the west, and we've come back with holes that have an easterly azimuth, and we've drilled through the structure at a more correct right angle to that. Those results are still pending, but you can see here roughly what it looks like. So there's a 30 to 40 meter wide zone that has a lot of alteration in it, and several zones that look to be subparallel that are mineralized at pretty interesting grades for a first round program. So when we come back to, we have quite a few results back from this area here, and then there's a lot of results pending actually from the southern extensions and the northern extensions, and also we have pending results from a number of these down dip holes that you see on this section, but we have these holes on the other sections as well. So those results we expect to be out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, certainly within this month. And from that we'll be planning a follow-up program, which will likely involve further holes down dip of the structure, and then additional holes closer into where we have these results that we reported, to map out where the heart of the system is. It looks, I mean, from the auger drilling and the results to date, it looks that we have pretty consistent gold leakage along this 4.5 kilometer structure, but we need systematic testing, obviously, to find out where's the heart of the system, where's the really juicy part. Another point to mention is that, you know, we've really only tested the very shallow portions of the system. These lines here are 50 meters apart, so we're looking to you know, maybe test it down to 60, 70 meters to date. That's really all, so quite shallow. Still a lot of potential. Here's some pictures from the Dyna project. These are the termite mounds that we sampled in the first pass work, and they give us pretty systematic coverage over all of the permits, outlining kilometer scale and very strong gold anomalies. This is the larger working by the local artisanal miners on Dyna 2. We drilled underneath this, and we saw some very attractive weathered, altered and intensely stock worked rock in there over a width of up to 30, 40 meters. And when we rock chip sample that, it gives us very attractive numbers from the rock chip sampling. These are some of the RC chips, a lot of quartz in there, and the RC drill rig at Dyna in action. Currently, we're waiting for the rest of the results to come back from the Dyna program. We have put the rig in for service. In a couple of weeks, it'll be heading out there again for follow-up work at Dyna, but then also we have a number of quite extensive auger trends in the bedrock that we need to drill test at Digifara. Target 1 here is trending over almost 7 kilometers strike length here, and then we have a number of golden bedrock anomalies at 2, 3 and 4 as well. The same methodology we deployed here: termite mount geochemistry, auger drilling, and then follow-up drill testing by RC in the first round, which incidentally is the same methodology that is deployed by Predictive Discovery, who found the Bunkan deposit with this approach. So the auger drilling at Digifara yielded up to 4.8 grams of gold from the bedrock basically, and similar numbers from saprolite sampling where we have exposed weathered bedrock, and 4 key targets, and we'll be testing with a 5,000 meter program starting later this month or early in November. We're in the middle of the rainy season now. We've done quite well to drill right to the end of September there. And the rains should really be easing up towards the end of the month and making the work in the field much easier from then onwards. Some pictures from Digifara. We see some nice rock here, brecciated quartz with lots of iron oxides after sulfides, silicified and altered volcanic clastics. Some of these rocks, you know, are between 2 and almost 3 grams. This is one of the auger rigs in action at Dyna. We had a number of these machines operating on each of the permits, between 1 and 2 on each permit, running day and night shift earlier part of this year to delineate the targets that we've got now. And there's a picture of some of the artisanal workings. The first round of local miners usually focus in on just the superficial material, working with metal detectors looking for coarse gold. In the second round, there's another group of miners that comes in and sinks little shafts to exploit the mineralization in the bedrock. Going on to Bantambai, this is the property on the western margin of the basin. Has some very extensive anomalies also defined in the northern part particularly. We have also extensive anomalies in the central portion. The laterite cover gets progressively thicker as we go to the south. Therefore, there's a much lower tenor of the gold geochemical response in the south, but we still see coherent kilometer scale gold anomalies. And up here we have very high tenors that persist over up to 3 kilometers in strike length. We follow these up with over 11,000 meters of auger drilling. Assays for these are pending, so we'll be collecting these over the coming weeks and compiling this data. And if we jump to the next slide here, which will be a focus, a zoom in on the northern portion, there's some very interesting geological features. We have quite a different structural setting. We have mainly in Adina and Digifara, if you remember from the maps, we have mainly northwest trending regional structures. Very consistent, very similar to what we see at Siguiri. At Bantambai, we have these almost east-west low angle thrust faults, at least 2 of them, and then these are intersected by northeast and northwest trending steep extensional structures. And where the 2 structural trends intersect, you see a big concentration of artisanal workings. You see them also on these extensional features, but predominantly they develop on the intersections. And away from these structural intersections, these structures are concealed by laterite. We have very strong geochemistry there, and we expect we get strong trends from the auger drilling as well. Down here you see a photo of one of the hills from area 4 here in the northern intersection of 3 and 4. Where the local miners have stripped off the laterite and actually mined quite extensively the weathered bedrock. When you look at pictures from area 2 here, which is right on the thrust fault, we can see beautiful low angle thrust with almost magnetic fabric. All of it is assaying gold values up to 2.89 grams. And then we have alteration and mineralization in the hanging wall, and in the footwall. We have a lot of silicification, stringer veins, disseminated sulfides that are now oxidized, and when we sample this, we get consistently good, interesting gold numbers up to 5.9 grams, and then some of the really quartz-rich material is yielding values up to 18 grams from rock chip sampling. You can see the pits that the local guys have opened up are quite deeply mined, and from the bottom of these pits, they tunnel down to get the high-grade material. So there's a beautiful coincidence of very interesting structural intersections with different styles of mineralization, all yielding interesting gold grades. And obviously the local small-scale mining is extracting gold from this as well. And none of this has ever been drill tested. So this is area 4 here. Just quickly jumping back to the slides here. This is the area where the 2 trends intersect. And again, we're getting beautifully altered volcaniclastics and with sediments. And getting nice rock chip samples out of that with up to 5.9 and 2.4 grams. Just a quick word on community relations before we go out and do any work, and regularly while we're doing work we actually have community meetings in each of the important villages on our permits. This is greatly facilitated by our country manager who speaks the local language and actually grew up in the region. The key is just to keep people informed, and we source all our labor locally, and even some of our mid-level technicians we managed to source from the region, and then our more senior staff we brought in from Conakry and neighboring countries. So that all helps with the community relationships, and in parallel to that we work also with the government structure. We see the local officials and inform them of what we're doing. With regards to the program for the rest of the year and into Q1, we're roughly here in October. We've completed a fair chunk of drilling here at Dina. Once the rig is back in service and the rains eased up a little bit, we'll be heading back out to Dina for follow-up drilling. And then also we're going to Digifara to start off our 5,000 meter program of RC testing there. So that'll give us consistent news flow from the drill bit probably right into January from these 2 programs. And then in January, we'll be heading out to Bantambai. There's a small follow-up infill auger drilling program to be done in the early part of January. And then we'll be starting to drill test some of these targets that we just looked at with a 5,000 meter program there. And that should, again, give us a lot of news flow right through to the end of Q1 next year. We've got quite a seasoned team, both in Canada as well as on the ground in Guinea there. And that is really allowing us to move very fast. We've just listed in mid-July and finished our first drilling program fairly quickly. Very nice, high-quality portfolio of assets in proven Tier 1 jurisdiction with multiple announced discoveries and operating mine. And none of it ever drill tested. We've just done our first drill test on one of the properties and really just on a couple of the targets that we've got there. We've got further targets and they're quite extensive in strike length. I can never stress enough how nice it is to work in this part of the world. Once you have the exploration permit, you can go out in the field and work, including drilling. This is very valuable because in many countries you can quickly lose 6-9 months just permitting a few drill holes. We don't have that issue here. This enables us really to move fast. Thank you very much for your attention. We should probably open it up to questions.
Thank you, Martin and Fiona, for your presentation. We'll now begin the Q&A. Your first question here is an operations question. What are you expecting in terms of the permitting process in Guinea, and have any of your peers experienced problems or long delays?
We have not followed the latest permitting processes too much. I know that Manacham is putting the Tri-K deposit into production. I did not hear of any delays or problems with that process. The other two assets have been in operation for a long time, so that permit is probably too old to be relevant now. But typically the way the process works is that once you're close to finishing your feasibility study, you start talking to the government about well in advance of construction. You start talking to them about the details of the mining agreement, basically. So you expect to have that pretty much negotiated before or on finishing of the feasibility study. You would do that in parallel and sort of minimize the delays there. So the country, I know, is very hungry for development. They're now actually pushing companies in the iron ore space to develop their assets rather than sit on them. So they're pro-development. I don't expect any delays there, really, probably quite the opposite.
Are there any permits needed in the short term?
No, we're good for permitting. We have our exploration permits. There is a code of how to operate, obviously. We have to minimize our environmental footprint, minimize the cutting of trees and all that sort of thing. As long as you respect that, there should not be any issues. And no further permits required for the work that we need to do right now at the exploration stage.
That's great, thank you. Can we see Sanu return to these high-grade exploration targets at Dana before drilling other potential areas for exploration?
We'll probably head out straight away again to Dina and then follow up with a short program there before heading out to Digifara. Or the other option we've been looking at, and it depends on the availability of suitable drill rigs, is maybe to start with 2 drill rigs when we get back into the field in early November.
What was your drill program guidance for 2022 and what have you achieved to date?
Okay, our guidance for 2022 was 10,000 meters of RC drilling, and we have just completed a little over 3,000 meters, and we'll be doing the rest in November and December. We've also had some guidance to around 30,000 meters of auger drilling early in the year, and we've achieved now well over that. I think we're close to 40,000 meters actually.
How much have you raised to date, and do you have enough on hand to complete your drilling programs?
We're good for the program that we have on the schedule right now, so we expect to achieve that, both funding and time-wise.
And about the question of how much was raised, it was about $6.6 million.
Just to break down how much money will be spent at each project in 2023.
It'll be strongly results dependent and also to some extent market dependent and our ability to raise sufficient funding. I would, in an ideal world, we will keep drilling with a minimum of one drill rig on each permit for most of the field season, which is to the end of June, early July. And then where we have success, we would probably ramp up to 2 or 3 rigs on those targets or those properties. So that can consume quite a lot of money, and we'll evaluate at the time what is feasible, really. There's more work to do. There's a lot of work to do, so it'll be a balance of what we can draw from the market versus what we need to drill. So we'll be prioritizing and working it in with the capital markets pretty much.
With such a significant GDP and exports attributed to mining in Guinea, does the government offer any particular benefits to mining companies as a result?
I think it's a standard West African mining convention that we typically have at the exploitation stage. And it's not preferential to other industries, but you do get some breaks on exemption on taxes of certain items, like fuel typically, or importing goods that you can't procure in country. Those are usually exempt from duties, especially when it comes to material and equipment for constructing a mine site. Which all helps, and which is not the case everywhere else. In many countries, you have to pay these duties regardless of whether you're building a mining asset or not. So you get some breaks like that in Guinea.
Do you have a rough budget or idea of how many meters you plan on completing in the next phase of the Dana Gold property?
We are just evaluating that now, and it will be finalized when we get the rest of the results in. But I would think we will drill another 1,500 to 2,000 meters in the next phase.
How did you go public? Was it via IPO or RTO?
There was an IPO basically.
Do you have any analyst coverage?
We don't have any analyst coverage yet. We've just begun talking with the analysts about the project, and obviously with this week's drill results, we're starting to see some interest from them.
Are any institutional holdings coming near the end of their hold?
No, I don't think the institutions that we have in there are in there for a discovery. I believe they'll be staying in there.
Yeah, we're not aware of any that are on a timed hold.
What are the geopolitical risks of operating in Guinea and West Africa? How have the dealings with the Guinean government been?
I find Guinea actually a very good jurisdiction to operate in. I've operated in many of the neighboring countries. We do not have any of the security issues that we see in some of the countries to the north, and probably even less red tape than 1 or 2 other countries in the region that I have experience in. So that's been very positive, even though we had a government change not long ago. They seem to be very pro-business, pro-development. I've seen a lot of effort being put into improving the infrastructure in the country. I've driven up the main national road from Conakry to Siguiri, and there's a lot of work being done on that, and then that's truly overdue, and that is thanks to the new government that's in. So I expect it will be like that in the coming years, and at some stage there will be a transition, and I think everybody's looking to have a country that's developing and funding itself. So I'm quite optimistic.
How strong is Sanu's social license to operate in Guinea?
Very strong, I would say, given that we now have a presence on all 3 of our permits. We have small camps on each of the permits, so we interact daily with the local communities there. They appreciate that. They appreciate the work this generates. Labor and technicians is all sourced from there. We source a lot of local produce for our camp kitchens as well from there. So that's all small-scale business activity, which can be provided by the communities locally. When we have to go and drill a site where some of the local people are mining, it's usually just a discussion and making them aware of when we want to drill somewhere, and typically they vacate the site and let us do our work there. So all in all, very good, very positive actually. The question is usually when do you need more people, when you're building the mine. We have to tell them it's a little bit early for that.
Thank you very much for taking the questions. Now with that, this concludes the Q&A for today's presentation. And now before we go, I'll turn the floor back over to Fiona and Martin for final remarks.
Great. Thank you very much to our listeners, and thank you, Karina, for hosting us, and to Fiona for doing the first pass. I think it went very well. Thank you very much.
And once again, this was Sanu Gold Corporation, trading on the CSE under ticker symbol SANU. Thank you again, everyone in Toronto and surrounding areas, for joining us today. Stay tuned for future presentations in your area, and we'll see you next time.